The laughter rippled through the grand exhibition hall like acid eating through metal. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood motionless before humanity's cultural display, her spine rigid as 12 alien diplomats pointed their various appendages at Earth's offerings and brayed with contempt. The sound translated through her neural implant as cascading waves of ridicule, each species contributing its own version of mockery to the symphony of derision. This High Curator Threxanoff gurgled through his membranes, his translucent body pulsing with violent amusement, is what the humans call art. He swept a pseudopod toward the central installation, a recreation of Guernica rendered in three-dimensional holographic light, its fracture forms frozen in eternal anguish. Beside it hung digital reproductions of Van Gogh's Starry Night, Hokusai's Great Wave, and a dozen other masterpieces that had defined human civilization's creative soul. Elena's fingers curled at her sides. Sweat traced invisible paths down her back beneath her formal diplomatic uniform. 3 years of preparation. Countless sacrifices. Everything humanity had invested to reach this moment. Their petition for membership in the Galactic Hegemony now hung suspended by threads thinner than spider silk. And these creatures were laughing. Crude pigment arrangements, Threxanoff continued, addressing the gathered diplomats like a professor explaining basic concepts to particularly slow students. Chaotic compositions lacking mathematical precision. No harmonic frequencies embedded within the visual spectrum. He turned his gelatinous mass toward Elena, 17 eyes blinking in sequence. Ambassador Vasquez, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Cultural submissions must demonstrate species maturity. Intellectual sophistication. Not this. The Zority delegate clicked her mandibles in agreement, her exoskeleton catching the hall's bioluminescent lighting. The hegemony has welcomed 300 species across 12 millennia. Each demonstrated mastery over quantum aesthetics, dimensional frequency art, or temporal sculpture. Your species offers color canvas. Elena breathed. In. Out. She had expected resistance. Admiral Chin had warned her during the preparation briefings that first contact protocols rarely favored younger civilizations. Human history painted across mere millennia appeared insignificant against empires spanning millions of years. But she hadn't expected this. Forgive my curiosity, High Curator. Elena's voice emerged steady, controlled, a diplomat's weapon wrapped in silk. Has your species ever faced extinction? Silence crashed through the chamber like a physical force. Threxanoff's eyes contracted simultaneously. An unusual question. A relevant one. Elena stepped forward, her boots echoing against the crystalline floor. The hegemony values maturity, sophistication. You measure species by their capacity for abstract manipulation of light and sound across dimensions humanity cannot yet perceive. She paused before Guernica, studying the twisted forms. We measure ourselves differently. Clearly, the Zority delegate hissed, by primitive standards, by survival. The word hung between them, sharp-edged and dangerous. Elena gestured toward the tortured imagery frozen in light. This piece was created in 1937 by a human named Pablo Picasso. It depicts the bombing of civilian population during our species' most devastating internal conflict. Do you see the screaming horse? The dismembered soldier? The mother cradling her dead child? She turned to face the assembled aliens, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic horrors behind her. Every brushstroke in this painting carries information. The angles encode the psychological impact of aerial bombardment on undefended populations. The color palette maps human fear responses. The spatial relationships between figures demonstrate how panic spreads through crowds. Her voice dropped, gaining weight. Art historians study it for its beauty. Military strategists study it for its tactical precision. Threxanoff rippled uncertainly. You suggest your decorations contain practical application? I suggest nothing. Elena moved to the next piece. Starry night swirling cosmos rendered in quantum-locked photons. This was painted by a man slowly losing his sanity, isolated in an asylum, watching the night sky. What do you see? Turbulence, the High Curator admitted. Inefficient turbulence patterns. Wrong. Elena traced the spiral patterns with her finger, not quite touching the light. You're seeing mathematically accurate fluid dynamics that scientists wouldn't formally describe for nearly a century. Van Gogh's damaged mind perceived natural chaos and encoded it visually. The same chaos patterns that govern atmospheric reentry calculations, defensive shield harmonics, and particle beam dispersion across battle zones. Murmurs spread among the delegates. The Zerati's mandibles had stopped clicking. Humanity doesn't create art to demonstrate sophistication, Elena continued, voice rising. We create it to survive. Every painting in this exhibition contains compressed information about conflict, strategy, resource management, or psychological manipulation. We learn to hide our military secrets in plain sight because our enemies never looked at beauty as a weapon. She rounded on Threxanov, closing the distance between them until she could see her reflection in his membrane. You spent the last hour laughing at these pieces, mocking their simplicity. Never once did you consider analyzing them for embedded data. Never once did you scan for encoded frequencies or mathematical substrates. Elena smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. That's exactly what we intended. The High Curator's color shifted from violet to a sickly gray-green. You're lying, he whispered. This is intimidation. A bluff from a desperate species seeking acceptance. Am I? Elena reached into her uniform and produced a thin data chip, holding it between two fingers like a blade. This contains our complete analysis of your defensive network architecture. We decoded it from the ceremonial tapestry displayed in your welcoming hall, the one woven by your Supreme Arbiter 6,000 years ago to commemorate the hegemony's founding. She paused. Beautiful work. The frequency patterns in the threading were particularly illuminating. Every alien in the chamber went still. The implications bloomed across their faces, or the nearest equivalents, like flowers of dawning horror. Humanity is not petitioning for membership, Elena announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the crystalline hall. We are serving notice. For 3 years, your diplomats have toured our museums, studied our galleries, transmitted detailed imagery of our cultural heritage back to your homeworlds. She let the silence stretch. Every piece contains encoded responses, tactical assessments, strategic capabilities. Your species have been uploading our battle plans into your most secure networks, disguised as primitive curiosities. Elena's smile widened, cold and bright. And now, High Curator, we would like to discuss the terms of our alliance. Threxanotha's 17 eyes focused on her, with something that transcended language. Fear. What? He managed. What exactly we downloaded? Elena Vasquez looked at the gathered diplomats, the accumulated power of civilization spanning millennia, and laughed. It was a sound they would never forget. Threxanov had ruled the hegemony's Cultural Preservation Council for 9,000 years. He had witnessed the rise of 17 species and the quiet extinction of 4. He had negotiated treaties that reshaped galactic borders and arbitrated disputes that prevented wars spanning star clusters. Never once had he felt his membranes contract with genuine terror. Until now. The emergency session convened 3 hours after Ambassador Vasquez's revelation, deep within the hegemony's Citadel of Concord, a structure carved from compressed neutron star fragment designed to withstand supernovae. Threxanov floated at the chamber center, surrounded by holographic projections of the 37 council members who govern known space. Explain, Supreme Arbiter Kefalones commanded, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic cascades. Slowly, completely, Threxanotha's 17 eyes dimmed an equivalent of a nervous swallow. The human ambassador claims our artistic traditions contain encoded military intelligence. She further claims they decoded our ceremonial tapestry, the founding weave itself, and extracted our defensive network architecture. Silence. Heavy. Oppressive. Impossible, declared Fleet Commander Zorix, his holographic presence crackling with barely contained fury. The militant caste had protected hegemony borders for 2 million years. The suggestion that primitive newcomers had penetrated their security was beyond insult. Our encryption matrices operate on quantum-lock frequencies. Their species hasn't even mastered basic dimensional folding. And yet, Threxanoth transmitted the data chip's contents to every council member simultaneously. Her evidence. The specifications materialized before each delegate, detailed schematics of the hegemony's defensive grid, patrol routes, fleet deployment protocols, and 17 emergency response procedures that had never been documented outside the Citadel's most classified archives. Keth Valoni's crystalline body chimed discordantly. This information is accurate. Verified against current deployments, Threxanoth confirmed, his voice small, down to individual vessel identification codes. How? Zorx's projection flickered with agitation. The founding weave is artwork, ceremonial fiber arranged in traditional patterns. There is nothing to decode. That came a new voice is precisely the point. Every projection turned toward the chamber's secondary entrance as Ambassador Vasquez strode in, flanked by 2 human guards in matte black tactical armor. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who understood her position completely and knew it was unassailable. Threxanoth felt his internal temperature drop 3 degrees. "Forgive the intrusion," Elena said, not sounding remotely apologetic. "Your security protocols flagged this meeting's subject matter. Given the circumstances, I thought directness might prove more efficient than waiting for your summons. You access our classified communications?" Zorx thundered. "Your communications access us constantly." Elena smiled that thin, dangerous smile again. "We simply returned the courtesy." She walked to the chamber's center, positioning herself beside Threxanoth's floating form. The High Curator instinctively drifted backward. "Fleet Commander, you asked how we decoded your ceremonial weave. The answer reveals a fundamental difference between our species, one hegemony failed to consider when evaluating humanity's worthiness." Elena produced a small device and projected an image into the chamber's display matrix. The founding weave appeared, an enormous tapestry depicting the original 7-species alliance, rendered in fibers that shifted color based on viewing angle. Your artisans created this 6,000 years ago to commemorate unity. They selected fibers based on aesthetic properties, color saturation, light refraction, emotional resonance, standard artistic considerations. She manipulated the projection, overlaying a mathematical grid. They never considered that the spacing between threads, the angle variations in the weave pattern, and the frequency interactions between differently colored fibers could be interpreted as data. "Because they cannot," Zorx insisted. "There is no intentional encoding." "Correct." Elena's eyes glittered. "The encoding is intentional. It's emergent. Your artisans unconsciously embedded information about their civilization into their work. Aesthetic preferences that reveal psychological profiles, color choices that map emotional spectrums, structural decisions that reflect hierarchical thinking." She paused, letting the implication sink. Every piece of art contains information about its creators. Most species never learned to read it. And humans did, Kefaloni said quietly. Humans had to. Elena's voice dropped, gaining an edge of old pain. Our species spent its formative millennia killing itself. War after war after war, fought with increasingly devastating weapons and decreasing resources. We couldn't afford conventional intelligence gathering. Too expensive, too slow. She turned to face the assembled holographic council. So we learned to read everything. Body language, vocal microfluctuations, architectural choices, artistic traditions. Every civilization broadcasts its secrets constantly. You simply need the eyes to see them. Threxanotha's membranes rippled with dawning comprehension. The cultural exchange programs were intelligence operations, Elena confirmed. Every museum your diplomats visited, every gallery tour, every educational presentation about human creative heritage. We weren't sharing our culture. We were profiling yours. She swept her gaze across the council projections. 37 representatives of species spanning millions of years of development, suddenly rendered vulnerable by a civilization barely into its second spacefaring century. Your delegates' aesthetic reactions told us about your threat assessment protocols. Their purchasing habits revealed resource allocation priorities. Their questions about specific artworks highlighted technological gaps in your scanning capabilities. Elena's smile never wavered. You learned nothing about us. We learned everything about you. Zorx's hologram blazed with crimson fury. This is an act of war. This is an act of survival. Elena's voice cracked like a whip across the chamber. Humanity requested diplomatic contact 17 times before the hegemony acknowledged our existence. We were deemed developmentally insufficient, a species to be monitored, contained, perhaps eventually absorbed when we matured sufficiently. She stepped forward, addressing Kefalones directly. We understood our position. Young, weak, technologically primitive by your standards. The hegemony has absorbed or eliminated dozens of species in similar circumstances, always for the greater galactic good. Elena's eyes hardened. We chose a different path. If we couldn't match your power, we would make ourselves too dangerous to destroy, too valuable to ignore, too unpredictable to safely contain. By hiding weapons in paintings, Threxanoth murmured, almost to himself, by hiding everything in paintings. Elena turned to face him, and for a moment, something almost like respect flickered across her features. High Curator, you're beginning to understand. The 12 masterpieces in that exhibition hall contain more than historical data. Each one carries encoded response protocols, coordinated with human military assets positioned throughout hegemony space over the past 3 years. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Response protocols, Kefalones repeated carefully, triggered by specific conditions. Elena clasped her hands behind her back, her stance shifting to something more formal, almost military. If this diplomatic mission fails, if our delegation is harmed, if humanity faces existential threat from hegemony action, she paused. The art activates. Fleet Commander Zorx's projection flickered erratically. What does that mean? Elena Vasquez looked at the assembled might of galactic civilization and delivered her answer with perfect calm. It means, Commander, that you spent 3 years displaying our battle plans in your most secure installations, transmitting them across your communication networks, and archiving them in your cultural databases. Her smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Every masterpiece is a key. Every gallery is a deployment point, and every hegemony system with human art now contains dormant military assets awaiting activation. She let the horror wash across 37 faces, or their nearest equivalents. Now, Elena continued, her voice soft as silk over steel. Shall we discuss alliance terms? Or would you prefer I demonstrate what happens when humans feel threatened? Supreme Arbiter Kefalones had not achieved her position through timidity. While lesser council members recoiled from Ambassador Vasquez's revelations, Kefalones studied a human with the clinical detachment of a species that had mastered quantum consciousness manipulation before humanity's ancestors descended from trees. Fear was an electrochemical response. It could be acknowledged, analyzed, and set aside. Your claims require verification, she announced, her crystalline form chiming with harmonic authority. You will submit to supervised analysis of one artwork. If your assertions prove accurate, we negotiate. If not, she left the consequence unspoken. Some threats gain power through ambiguity. Elena's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered behind her eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or anticipation. Which piece? The turbulent one. The night sky painting. Kefalones accessed the exhibition catalog through the Citadel's neural interface. You claim to contain fluid dynamics formulas predicting our shield harmonics. We will test this assertion directly. Starry Night. Elena nodded slowly. An ambitious choice. Van Gogh encoded significant data in that piece. More than I revealed initially. Then you welcomed examination. I welcome understanding. Elena's voice carried something new, a note of genuine emotion beneath the diplomatic armor. The hegemony has spent 3 days viewing humanity as primitives or threats. Perhaps verification will offer a third perspective. Kefalones' crystalline structure pulsed with interest. The human ambassador confused her established categories. Deception required consistency. Elena's emotional variation suggested something more complex than simple manipulation. Proceed, the Supreme Arbiter commanded. The analysis chamber occupied 17 dimensions simultaneously, allowing examination of physical objects across every measurable spectrum. As Starry Night's holographic recreation materialized at its center, 7 senior researchers from 4 species prepared their instruments. Elena stood beside Threxanoff, watching the process unfold. The High Curator had requested assignment to the verification team, ostensibly to observe, though his 17 eyes kept drifting toward the human ambassador with undisguised fascination. "You're not afraid," he observed quietly, his membranes rippling with each word. "Your species faces potential annihilation, yet your stress hormones remain stable. Your cardiac rhythm suggests mild excitement rather than terror. You're reading my biosigns." Standard security protocol. Threxanotha's color shifted toward apologetic amber. "Though I admit curiosity, in 9,000 years, I have never encountered a species that weaponized aesthetics. The concept seems contradictory." Elena watched the researchers calibrate their dimensional scanners, her expression thoughtful. "High Curator, what do you believe art accomplishes?" "Expression, preservation of cultural memory, demonstration of species sophistication. All true, all incomplete." Elena turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling cosmos of Van Gogh's masterpiece. "Art is communication. The transfer of complex information between minds, emotions, experiences, understanding that language cannot capture." She paused. "And any communication channel can carry any message. The question is whether observers know to look." "Ambassador," Chief Researcher Vrethkai interrupted from the analysis station, her insectoid compound eyes reflecting 17 different scanning frequencies. "We have completed preliminary examination." Kefalones' holographic presence materialized beside them. "Report." Vrethkai's mandibles clicked uncertainly, a sound Threxanoth had never heard the stoic researcher produce. The painting's surface layer contained standard pigment compounds arranged in patterns consistent with human artistic techniques. Nothing unusual. She manipulated the display, peeling away visual layers. However, the spatial relationships between brushstrokes generate interference patterns when viewed through quantum frequency analysis. The chamber's main display shifted, revealing Starry Night's familiar swirls transformed into cascading mathematical structures. "These patterns encode fluid dynamics equations," Vrethkai continued, her voice growing more agitated. "Specifically, equations describing turbulent flow in plasma-based offensive shields. The mathematics are accurate to 17 decimal places, precision exceeding our published research by 3 orders of magnitude." Silence crashed through the chamber. "How?" Zorx's holographic form demanded, joining the growing audience. "Human technology cannot achieve such precision. Human technology didn't create these equations." Elena's voice cut through the rising murmurs. "Vincent van Gogh did, in 1889, using nothing but oil paints and a damaged brain that perceived reality differently than his contemporaries." She stepped forward, addressing the assembled researchers and council members directly. Van Gogh suffered from severe mental illness, conditions that disrupted normal cognitive processing. He painted what he saw, and what he saw was a mathematical substrate underlying physical reality. Elena gestured toward the transformed display. "Humanity didn't encode this data intentionally. We recognized it, cataloged it, learned to read what our artists unconsciously embedded in their work across millennia." Threxanotha's membranes contracted sharply. "You're suggesting human mental dysfunction produces scientific revelation?" "I'm suggesting human consciousness interacts with reality in ways your species never investigated because you considered us developmentally inferior." Elena's voice hardened. "Every human artist who ever lived contributed to our understanding of universal mechanics, the accumulated weight of millions of creative minds, spanning thousands of years, all perceiving and recording aspects of existence that escaped formal scientific notice." She turned to face Kefalones' crystalline projection. The hegemony masters quantum manipulation, dimensional folding, temporal sculpture, incredible achievements requiring vast technological infrastructure. Elena smiled thinly. "Humanity accomplishes similar understanding through madness, passion, and colored pigment. We are not inferior, Supreme Arbiter. We are different, and that difference terrifies you. Kefalones' harmonic frequencies shifted through several octaves, the crystalline equivalent of a thoughtful frown. Your species weaponized this capability. My species survived using this capability. The distinction carried weight. Do you know how many human civilizations rose and fell before we achieved space travel? How many times we nearly exterminated ourselves? War is humanity's oldest tradition. We have fought with rocks, steel, atoms, and ideas. Art became another weapon because survival demanded it. The response protocols you mentioned, Kefalones pressed. Explain their mechanism. Elena hesitated. The first genuine uncertainty Threxanoth had observed from her. That information carries significant risk, as does withholding it. For a long moment, the human ambassador studied the Supreme Arbiter's crystalline form. Then she nodded slowly, something shifting in her posture, a burden accepted rather than imposed. Every piece of human art contains layered information, surface aesthetics, mathematical substrates, emotional resonance patterns. Elena's voice dropped, gaining gravity. But certain pieces, those displayed in your most secure installations, carry an additional layer, trigger sequences. She manipulated the analysis display, revealing a new pattern buried beneath Starry Night's mathematical structures. These sequences interface with human neural implants through quantum entanglement established during the encoding process. When specific conditions are met, threat assessment, distress signals, communication blackouts, the art itself broadcasts activation commands. Vrethkai's compound eyes widened. The paintings can transmit? The paintings are already transmitting, constantly, on frequencies your technology cannot detect because they operate through aesthetic resonance rather than electromagnetic spectrum. Elena's expression grew solemn. Every human with neural implants within range of displayed artwork receives continuous status updates. Every piece knows where it is, who views it, and what threatens the humans connected to it. Connected? Threxanotha's color shifted toward horrified gray. The cultural exchange delegations, the diplomats who visited your museums, received implant modifications as standard protocol, Elena confirmed. They've been linked to our artistic network for 3 years, broadcasting hegemony information to humanity, receiving updates from every human artwork in hegemony space. Kefalones' crystalline form chimed sharply. You infected our diplomats. We included your diplomats. Elena's correction carried careful emphasis. They're not harmed. They're not controlled. But they're connected to a network that spans both our civilizations. A network that hegemony unknowingly helped construct by displaying our art in every significant installation. The implications cascaded through the chamber, like dominoes falling in slow motion. If you destroy the artwork, Threxanoth realized aloud, the network registers threat and triggers response protocols. If you harm our delegation, the connected diplomats broadcast distress signals. If you attempt to remove implant modifications, the process reads as hostile action. Elena Vasquez stood amid the gathered might of galactic civilization and delivered her final revelation with quiet certainty. Humanity is not holding the hegemony hostage, Supreme Arbiter. We've made ourselves essential to it. Our art has become part of your cultural infrastructure. Our people are woven into your communication networks. Our survival is now directly linked to your stability. She spread her hands, a gesture of openness that somehow conveyed absolute control. So, shall we discuss those alliance terms now? The alarm came without warning. Crimson light flooded the analysis chamber as 17 dimensions of scanning equipment simultaneously registered an anomaly. Threxanotha's membranes contracted violently, his 17 eyes darting between displays that scrolled threat assessments faster than even his enhanced cognition could process. The artwork, Vrethkai shrieked, her compound eyes reflecting cascading data streams. It's activating. Every holographic council member flickered with interference as Starry Night's swirling cosmos began to pulse with light that existed outside normal visual spectrums. The painting, or rather, its holographic recreation, had somehow accessed the Citadel's power grid, drawing energy from systems theoretically isolated from external manipulation. Ambassador Vasquez. Kefalones' crystalline form chimed with frequencies sharp enough to shatter conventional glass. Explain this immediately. But Elena stood motionless, her expression shifting from controlled composure to something Threxanoff had never witnessed on a human face. "Ah, I didn't trigger this," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the alarms. "The network is responding to something else." Responding to what? Zorx's holographic form blazed with barely contained violence. "Your protocols threaten activation upon hostile action. We have taken no hostile action. Na hostility." Elena's eyes remained fixed on the pulsing artwork, tears forming their corners, a human stress response Threxanoff recognized from cultural databases. Recognition. It's responding to recognition. Before anyone could demand clarification, the light exploded outward. Threxanoff had experienced consciousness transfer, dimensional phasing, and temporal displacement across his 9,000 years. Nothing prepared him for what followed. The light passed through his membranes and touched something deeper, the fundamental processing matrix that constituted his awareness. For one eternal instant, he stopped being Threxanoff, High Curator of Hegemony's Cultural Preservation Council. He became Vincent van Gogh. The asylum walls pressed close, thick with summer heat, and the smell of oil paints mixed with institutional disinfectant. His hands, human hands, callous and stained with pigment, trembled as they gripped a brush. The night sky beckoned through barred windows, but it wasn't the sky others saw. It was alive. Energy spiraled between stars and patterns that screamed with mathematical beauty. The moon pulsed like a heartbeat. The cypress tree below reached toward heaven with desperate longing that mirrored his own fractured soul. Everything connected. Every point of light linked to every other in a vast, living web of meaning that demanded expression. He had to paint it, had to capture what his broken mind perceived so others might someday understand. He had to share. The brush touched canvas, and Threxanoff experienced something no member of his species had ever known. The desperate, beautiful, agonizing need to create. The vision released him as suddenly as it had arrived. Threxanoff collapsed against the analysis chamber's floor, his membranes heaving with exertion. Around him, council members and researchers displayed similar disorientation. Kefalones' crystalline form flickered through unstable frequency ranges. Zorx's holographic presence had partially dissolved, and Vrethkai had curled into a defensive posture, her compound eyes cycling through colors that signified profound confusion. "What?" The High Curator's voice emerged as a shattered whisper. "What was that?" Elena Vasquez knelt beside him, her face streaked with tears, her expression carrying the weight of someone sharing a secret held too long. "That was human consciousness," she said softly. "That was what our art actually contains." Kefalones recovered first, her crystalline structure stabilizing into new configurations. "You embedded experiential data, not military intelligence, lived experience." "Both." Elena rose slowly, addressing the chamber with a voice stripped of diplomatic armor. "The hegemony feared our response protocols would trigger weapons, destruction, violence." She shook her head. "We consider that path. For years, military strategists designed exactly the doomsday scenarios you imagined. Art that could disable fleets, paintings that could corrupt networks, sculptures containing dimensional collapse triggers. But you chose differently," Threxanoff realized, his 17 eyes focusing on her with new understanding. "We chose communication." Elena's voice carried centuries of human struggle. Every piece of art in hegemony space contains fragments of human consciousness, not just mathematical data or tactical information, but the actual experience of being human. Our fears, our hopes, our desperate, beautiful, terrifying need to connect with something beyond ourselves. She gestured toward Starry Night, still pulsing gently with residual energy. When hegemony finally recognized what our art truly contained, when your researchers genuinely understood, rather than simply analyzed, the network responded, not with weapons. Her smile returned, but transformed, warm rather than sharp, genuine rather than calculated, with introductions. Fleet Commander Zorx's holographic form had fully reconstituted, but his aggressive crimson coloring had faded to something approaching uncertain amber. I experienced a human pilot during your species' first atmospheric conflict. The terror of falling, the determination to protect others despite overwhelming fear. His voice carried unfamiliar resonance. I understood why he flew into certain death. I felt his choice. As I felt the sculptor who shaped your memorial to fallen warriors, Kefalones added, her harmonic frequencies gentle now. The grief, the pride, the desperate hope that sacrifice carries meaning. The network connects more than information, Elena explained. It connects understanding. Every species that displays human art becomes capable of experiencing human consciousness, and every human connected to the network can experience theirs in return. Threxanatha's color shifted through complex emotional spectrums he couldn't name. You weaponized empathy. We weaponized connection. The distinction mattered. Humanity couldn't match the hegemony's technology, military power, or developmental history. But we could offer something no other species had achieved. The ability to genuinely understand each other across every barrier of biology, psychology, and culture. She turned to face Kefalones directly. Supreme Arbiter, you ask what humanity wants. You assume we sought power, territory, or protection from annihilation. Elena spread her hands in a gesture of absolute openness. We want partnership. True partnership, built on mutual understanding rather than mutual fear. The kind that's only possible when you can experience another species' consciousness directly. And if we had rejected you? Kefalones asked. If we had destroyed your artwork? Harmed your delegation? Elena's expression grew solemn. Then every hegemony member who experienced the activation would have understood why humanity fought back. They would have felt our fear, our desperation, our absolute commitment to survival. She paused. It's difficult to wage war against someone whose soul you've touched. The analysis chamber fell silent as the implications settled across assembled minds. Threxanath had spent 9,000 years evaluating species for cultural sophistication. He had measured their worth through technological achievement, artistic complexity, and philosophical development. He had dismissed humanity as primitive, colored canvas and chaotic compositions. He had been magnificently, profoundly wrong. The alliance terms, Kefalones said finally, her crystalline form chiming with new harmonics. Present them. Elena Vasquez, ambassador of Earth, architect of the greatest diplomatic transformation in galactic history, smiled with genuine warmth for the first time since arriving. We propose a cultural integration initiative, human art displayed throughout hegemony space, with full disclosure of its experiential capabilities. Voluntary consciousness sharing programs between species, joint exploration of creative techniques that could expand the network to include all hegemony members. You want to connect everyone, Zorix said slowly. Every species, every consciousness. We want to end the possibility of war through misunderstanding. Elena's voice carried conviction forged through millennia of human conflict. Empathy, fleet commander, is the ultimate weapon. It makes enemies impossible. Kefalones' crystalline form pulsed with decision. The hegemony accepts. 3 years later, the Grand Exhibition Hall displayed artwork from 47 species. Visitors wandered between installations, pausing to touch sculptures that granted glimpses into alien consciousness, studying paintings that revealed the emotional landscapes of beings they would never otherwise understand. Threxanath floated before a new edition, a collaborative piece created by human and hegemony artists together. Its swirling forms encoded something unprecedented, shared experience, woven from the consciousness of species that had once feared each other. Beside him, Ambassador Vasquez watched the viewers with quiet satisfaction. Humanity taught the galaxy to see art as warfare strategy, he observed, then transformed warfare into connection. Elena smiled. We taught the galaxy to see. High Curator. She gestured toward the gathered species, sharing consciousness across barriers that had seemed insurmountable. That was always the strategy. Above them, painted stars swirled with light that existed in every dimension simultaneously, a universe finally learning to understand itself. The distress signal arrived wrapped in frequencies that shouldn't exist. Elena Vasquez stood in the newly constructed nexus of understanding, humanity's gift to the hegemony, a gallery station orbiting the neutral point between three major trade routes, when the transmission shattered 17 separate consciousness-sharing installations simultaneously. Artists and visitors collapsed across 4 decks, their neural implants overloaded by something that felt like meaning turned inside out. Ambassador! Threxanoff materialized beside her, his membrane cycling through distressed colors faster than she'd ever witnessed. The outer colonies. Something is... Another wave struck. Elena's implant screamed with fractured data. Not information, not experience, but absence. The sensation of touching a void where consciousness should exist. She gasped, gripping a nearby railing as her legs threatened to buckle. That's not a distress signal, she managed through gritted teeth. That's an attack. 47 hours later, the combined Hegemony-Human Strategic Council convened in the Citadel of Concord. The crystalline chamber hummed with tension that transcended species boundaries, a shared dread that the consciousness network had never been designed to carry. Fleet Commander Zorx's holographic form dominated the central display, flanked by tactical projections that painted an increasingly horrifying picture. 3 colony worlds in the outer reach have gone silent, he reported, his crimson coloring muted by something Elena had learned to recognize as militant caste grief. Population: 17 million across 4 species. Current status: unknown. All consciousness network connections severed simultaneously. Sever how? Kefalones demanded, her crystalline harmonics sharp with concern. Not destroyed. Not blocked. Zorx's projection flickered with uncertainty, an emotion the fleet commander rarely displayed. The connections remain technically active, but there is nothing on the other end. No consciousness. No experience. No souls. Threxanoff finished quietly. The words settled across the chamber, like ash after wildfire. Elena studied the tactical displays, her mind racing through possibilities. The consciousness-sharing network had transformed hegemony politics over 3 years. Species that had maintained suspicious distance for millennia now collaborated openly, their mutual understanding fostered by artistic installations that allowed genuine empathy across biological barriers. But the network required consciousness to function. Without minds to connect, the art was merely pigment and light. Show me the transmission, she ordered, the one that damaged our installations. Vreth Kai, now chief researcher of the Joint Human Hegemony Analysis Division, manipulated the display with her compound eyes reflecting deep unease. Ambassador, exposure carries significant risk. Your neural architecture barely survived the initial pulse. I need to understand what we're facing. The insectoid researcher hesitated, mandibles clicking through calculations. Then she transmitted a carefully isolated fragment directly to Elena's implant. The void touched her again. This time, Elena forced herself to remain present, to analyze rather than recoil. The sensation wasn't pain exactly. It was subtraction, the experience of something being removed so completely that even the memory of its presence disappeared. And beneath the void, barely perceptible, she felt something else. Hunger. They're not destroying consciousness, Elena said slowly, her voice distant as she processed a revelation. They're consuming it. The entity, for it defied conventional species classification, had no name the hegemony recognized. Analysis of debris recovered from the outer colonies revealed technology that operated on principles the most advanced hegemony scientists couldn't comprehend. Not dimensional folding or quantum manipulation, but something older, stranger. Their vessels appeared constructed from compressed void itself, spaces where existence had been deliberately removed. We call them the Hollow, Ambassador Vasquez explained to the emergency council session, her expression grave. Based on recovered data fragments, they've existed outside hegemony map space for approximately 2 million years, possibly longer. Why have we never encountered them? Kefalones asked. Because they had no reason to approach. Elena manipulated the central display, projecting analysis that had cost 3 human researchers their sanity to compile. The Hollow consumed consciousness, awareness, experience, the fundamental spark that makes beings beings. They existed in regions of space devoid of intelligent life, feeding on residual psychic energy left by extinct civilizations. What changed? Zorix demanded. Elena's dark eyes met the fleet commander's holographic gaze. We lit a beacon. The consciousness-sharing network generates more concentrated experiential energy than anything in galactic history. Billions of minds connected, sharing, understanding each other. She paused, letting the horror sink in. To the hollow, we created an all-you-can-eat buffet. Threxanatha's membranes had faded to colorless transparency, the equivalent of human pallor. Our greatest achievement, our bridge between species. It drew predators. It drew the predator. Elena's voice carried weight that silenced even Zorx's protests. The hollow aren't a species. They're a condition, a state of existence defined by the consumption of consciousness. They can't be reasoned with because they have nothing we would recognize as minds. They can't be threatened because our weapons target physical matter, and they exist primarily as absence. Then how do we fight them? Kethalones asked, her crystalline form chiming with frequencies that demanded answers. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Every council member waited, accustomed now to humanity's ambassador producing impossible solutions from seemingly hopeless situations. I don't know, she admitted finally. The silence that followed was more devastating than the hollow's void. 3 days passed. 6 more colonies went dark. Elena stood in the Nexus of Understanding's central gallery, surrounded by artwork from 47 species. The consciousness network pulsed weakly around her. Artists and connected individuals across hegemony space had voluntarily reduced their sharing intensity, hoping to dim the beacon that attracted the hollow. It wasn't working. The predators had tasted concentrated consciousness. They wanted more. You're searching for answers in the art, Threxanath observed, materializing beside her with the quiet grace that 9,000 years of diplomatic service had perfected. I always find answers in the art. Elena's voice was hollow, a terrible irony she couldn't escape. Human creativity solved our integration with the hegemony. I keep hoping it will solve this too. Perhaps it cannot. The High Curator's 17 eyes studied her with something approaching compassion. Some problems require more than cleverness. Some threats cannot be transformed into allies. You're suggesting we give up? I'm suggesting we accept limitations. Threxanatha's membranes rippled with complex emotion. Humanity taught us to connect consciousness, share experience, build empathy across impossible barriers. These were gifts beyond measure. But the hollow have no consciousness to share, no experience to connect. They are the antithesis of everything your art accomplishes. Elena stared at a painting she had brought from Earth, a recreation of Picasso's Guernica, the same piece that had started everything 4 years ago. The twisted forms, the screaming horse, the mother clutching her dead child, the painting that encoded tactical information while screaming with emotional truth. Something stirred in her mind. That's not quite right, she murmured. Threxanatha's color shifted toward curiosity. Ambassador? Elena turned to face him, her eyes brightening with the spark of forming understanding. You said the hollow are the antithesis of what our art accomplishes, but you're thinking about art the way the hegemony originally understood it, as expression, preservation, demonstration of sophistication. And how should I think about it? As communication. Elena began pacing, her thoughts accelerating. Art transmits information between minds. But what if the information isn't consciousness? What if it's the structure of consciousness, the pattern that makes awareness possible? Threxanatha's 17 eyes widened. You're suggesting we encode the capacity for consciousness itself. I'm suggesting we encode hunger. Elena stopped, facing Guernica's twisted anguish. The hollow consume awareness because they have none of their own. They exist as void because void is all they've ever known. But void isn't natural. It's the absence of something that should be present. She touched the painting's surface, feeling the consciousness network pulse beneath her fingertips. What if we gave them something to fill the absence? Not our consciousness. They consume that instantly, but the potential for consciousness. The seed of awareness that could grow within their void. You want to infect the hollow with the capacity to feel, Threxanath said slowly. I want to give them the choice to feel. Elena's voice carried conviction forged through 4 years of impossible diplomacy. Every piece of art in our network contains experiential data, emotions, perceptions, understanding. But underneath that data is something more fundamental, the mathematical structure that makes experience possible, the pattern that awareness follows. She turned to the High Curator, her expression fierce. We're going to create new art, Threxanoth. Art that doesn't share consciousness. Art that shares a blueprint for consciousness. And we're going to broadcast it directly into the void.